Hello and welcome to episode 42 of Can We Still Be Friends, the podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. 25 years ago, Oliver Stone brought fringe conspiracy theories to mainstream theaters with his exhaustive epic, JFK. We were inspired to rewatch this one after watching Ezra Edelman's own thorough exploration of the life and trials of O.J. Simpson, called O.J. Made in America. Both of us remember liking JFK, but it is a film that almost demands sifting through the flood of information multiple times.
Nominated for 8 Oscars, including Best Picture, and winning 2 for editing and cinematography, JFK also inspired some real change, leading to the 1992 Assassinations Disclosure Act. For a detail-oriented movie with a runtime of nearly 3.5 hours, the movie made a surprising $205 million worldwide. Its appeal might have been in its star-studded cast or the controversy surrounding Stone's bold depiction of a corrupt government and colluding FBI.
But does Stone's inquest of history make for a good movie?
Or is the spate of conspiracy theories just another veil to distract us from the fact that JFK is nothing more than the rambling tirade of a paranoid nut? Keep listening.
Back and to the left, Ryan. Back and to the left.
One more time.
Back and to the left.
To the left. Okay.
I sometimes think things have gone downhill since John Kennedy died, Senator.
Well, don't get me started on that. Those Warren Commission fellas were picking that shit out of Pepper. Nobody's gonna tell me that kid did the shooting job he did from that damn bookstore.
Here you go, Senator Long.
Oh, thank you, honey.
I thought the FBI testified the rifle to see if it could be done.
Sure, 3 experts, and not one of them could do it. They're telling us that Oswald got off 3 shots with world-class precision from a manual bolt-action rifle in less than 6 seconds. And according to his Marine buddies, he's got Maggie's drawers. You know what that means? Wasn't any good. Average man be lucky to get 2 shots off. And I tell you, the first shot would always be the best. Here, the 3rd shot's perfect. Then they got that crazy bullet zigzagging all over the place, so it hits Kennedy and Connolly 7 times. Ah, one pristine bullet, that dog don't hunt.
All right, so that was the greatest Walter Matthau as Senator Long, talking to Kevin Costner as Louisiana DA, District Attorney Jim Garrison, in the movie we're discussing today, JFK. 2
of approximately 300 movie stars.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I mean, every scene you're like, wow, they're in this?
Yeah, seriously, and it's been so many years since I'd seen it that I was like, I kind of had to just keep writing down all these people that I was like, oh, I forgot they were in the movie.
Yep.
I forgot Gary Oldham was Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
I forgot that.
Forgot about Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that too.
John Candy.
Yes, forgot about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot them all.
Yeah.
But there were so many of them.
Yeah.
Like it was like
crazy.
Pokemon, you know? You got to catch them all.
Yeah. Wow, relevant.
We're so relevant, yeah. And I thought it was funny in that scene, he says that dog don't hunt. The only other time I've ever heard that saying was in a DNC convention speech from 2012 where they were talking about Mitt Romney.
Really?
And he kept saying, it was Schweitzer, and he kept saying, that dog don't hunt, after like everything he would talk about in Mitt Romney's platform.
That's funny. Yeah, I was saddened that Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau are in this movie and don't share a scene.
Yeah.
But that would have been weird to see, like... The Odd Couple,
right?
Probably dropping some F-bombs. Like, I don't know. But that being said, we're going to talk about all that stuff probably, except maybe not so much Mitt Romney. But we're doing JFK in large part, like we said, because Nate and I both watched Ezra Edelman's ESPN 30 for 30 documentary, O.J. Made in America, which is another very long, very detailed look at a very famous incident in American history.
Sure.
The O.J. Made in America, it's 7.5 hours long, I think.
Yeah.
And flew by for me. I mean, I loved it.
Yeah. And but I'll also say this. I think that when we announced that this was going to be our episode and we made that connection, also the fact that JFK is 25 years old this year. But at the time, even I was kind of like, well, you know, I'm glad we get to rewatch this movie, but it's kind of a stretch. But so much has happened since then. I mean,
I gotta tell you.
I could not believe. I don't think we could have picked a better movie to talk about right now.
I know.
Honestly.
That's the thing. I was going to say, sometimes our movie picks are just shockingly dead on, and we had no idea why.
Right.
This one, so we're recording this the weekend after the Republican convention.
Right. So Donald Trump is now the official, not
Right.
presumptive, the official nominee of the Republican Party.
All those speeches happened.
Uh-huh.
And we've got the Democratic convention coming up.
And Wasserman Schultz
Just resigned
today.
today.
Yeah.
So we are living in a time where not only are conspiracies sort of coming up, we're also watching politicians and constantly saying, is that true?
Right. And we're also in a moment where I think the entire country is sort of becoming disillusioned with what does it even mean?
Mm-hmm.
What is our government even doing anymore?
Right.
What does it even mean to be an American anymore? Which are the same questions that through the lens of Jim Garrison are being asked mainly by Oliver Stone.
Yes.
In this movie JFK, 25 years old, but yet I was kind of watching this like, holy cow. And I think we're going to get even more into the details of how, sadly up to date this movie felt, and also even the specific things it chose to portray of that time period that I don't think a lot of I certainly don't remember because I wasn't born, but you don't hear it talked about much in history class. And I'm not even talking about specifics of the assassination. One example I have is even just that a lot of people were happy when he was assassinated.
There were people,
And
which
that level of anger we think is new today. That anger that kind of comes from that populist, what a lot of people would consider to be what brought Trump into the forefront.
Yeah. And I mean, you always hear people from that generation, you always remember where you were when you heard Kennedy was shot.
Yeah.
And you get this image of the nation mourning.
Yes.
But this movie, and it doesn't belabor the point.
No, not at all.
But it just shows that as people in a restaurant watch the news on TV, a few people are just, good.
He did so much for this country, for colored people. Why?
He's dirty! Goodbye, you boring bastard! Stay tuned. Die! Shut the fuck up! Mind your own business.
God, I'm ashamed to be an American today.
The President of the United States is dead.
And I think actually in the movie, the purpose there is more to represent the feeling towards JFK at the time, or who JFK was as a president, as opposed to saying anything really essential about America in those points.
Even though it ended up kind of doing just that.
Yeah.
Now, we were both alive in 1991 when this movie came out. But, I mean, I was 7, so I definitely didn't see it. But I do have memories of the time period, but I can imagine people in 1991 watching this movie and thinking about the first Gulf War. When this movie came out, it would have been, I think, after the Gulf conflict was officially over.
Right.
But not realistically over. So I'm sure that they are watching this movie about Vietnam and the government's interest in fighting the Vietnam War as they think about the oil fields of Kuwait that were being fought over. So I bet in 1991 this movie felt up to date, and it was shocking how even now it feels sadly realistic for the times.
Yeah.
But I didn't see it in 1991. You didn't see it in 1991.
I did not, but I do remember my parents watching it.
Really?
And I remember them, they watched it on, VHS. They rented it.
The double,
yes.
that thick.
And I remember, I think the two movies that I remember my parents watching because they felt like they needed to watch were JFK and Last Temptation of Christ.
Wow.
Not at the same time, obviously, but just like...
Those were two movies that
in my mind, I
would
remember
never
my
have come into
parents...
my home.
I just remember my parents... I felt like they were only renting them because they felt like it was almost a duty to watch it, just to know what all the talk was about,
Yeah.
and to be able to
all the
talk with it with
controversy.
some authority,
Sure. Yeah, it definitely wasn't a movie that was ever in my house. And I think the first time I saw it, I do. I remember. I know exactly when I saw it and why I saw it. So I checked out Roger Ebert's Great Movies book, and JFK was in there, and I was kind of surprised because you don't hear about this movie very often, really.
Yeah.
All that much. It's not brought up at the Oscars for
it's not on the AFI list,
right,
100
it's
years,
just,
100 movies, yeah.
And it's long, I don't know. And then Roger Ebert wrote about it, and I was kind of working my way through that book, reading an essay, watching the movie, reading the essay, that sort of thing. So I was like, okay, I'll get JFK. So this was probably 6 years ago.
Okay.
That I did that, and thought I would watch it in pieces because it was so long,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't believe how I was just totally drawn in, and the hours just really flew by,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just shocked at how good it was.
Yeah.
How good it is. It was just a good movie.
Yeah.
And so well crafted. And it wasn't the first Oliver Stone I'd seen, and I don't love all the Oliver Stone that I have seen. Some of it's really messy, some of it's really agenda driven, and I was afraid of that. And this was about as clear a movie as you can get,
Mm-hmm.
while raising so many questions. Like it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen it once since then.
So this was
Before I
actually your
rewatched it. This
third
was my
time?
third time
Okay.
seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah, before we get too much, because there's a lot in there that I'm sure we're going to get into every little piece of that and break it down. I'm actually really excited to talk about this movie for some reason. So,
Good.
Yeah, I say for some reason as if most of the time I'm like, why are we talking
Usually
about
this is a real chore for me.
Anyways, my first time was in that period after college where I was just tearing through movies. You know, I would go to the public library and just grab a stack.
Yeah.
And you know, it's
I miss those days.
I almost shouldn't say this because it really cuts into any sort of authority we have to be doing this podcast. But I'm lucky if I can get through like a movie a week these days.
Yeah, I know.
But back then, man, I'd watch like 7 or 8 a week. You know.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's a tangent.
In college, I pretty much watched a movie a day.
Yeah.
If not more. Like it was a base.
They were great. Those were
movie a day.
Those were great days.
Yeah.
And I remember I picked up JFK, but it wasn't because I didn't know it was an Ebert great movie until a lot later.
Yeah.
And I just remember it was amongst a lot of other movies I grabbed, and it was the one I saw the cover. And so I just picked it up, and I didn't know how long it was. Although I did know it came in the 2 VHSs when I was younger. I didn't know it was that long. Right. But anyways, I took it home. I watched it by myself, and I was like you. I thought I was going to watch it in pieces, and just couldn't stop watching it. And I'm also with you where Oliver Stone to me was a guy who I had liked some of the stuff I had seen. I liked Platoon and Born on the 4th of July. There was other stuff I had seen.
Born on the 4th of July yet. I really want to.
It's good. It's really good.
I even like Natural Born Killers for what it was.
Yeah, I do too. Actually, I like that movie.
Wall Street.
Yeah, not so much that one. I don't like that movie, but I didn't see that one until a lot later. Anyways, I equated Oliver Stone with the Agenda movie, with the movie that was going to make you question things and make you question your government and make you question what it meant to be a patriot and meant to be an American. That's all I really equated Oliver Stone with. This is the first time I watched a movie where I realized that Oliver Stone as a filmmaker, as like just a very, very skilled filmmaker, and being kind of blown away by what he was pulling off with this movie. And that's kind of what stuck with me. And I just always appreciated it. It wasn't until later that, like I said, I realized it was a Roger Ebert great movie, read that, totally agree with it. But really, I didn't hear a huge amount of champions for this movie. And I kind of felt like...
still don't.
No, I know, but
it's
crazy because... Well, I'm sure we'll get into it. We'll get into it later. But anyway, so that was, if you want to bring the Letterboxd thing into it, letterboxd.com. My star rating before our rewatch was a 4-star rating.
Okay.
Do you remember what yours was?
Yeah, I rated it at 4 stars too.
Okay. Now, you've rewatched it. What are you thinking?
I could go as high as 5 with this one.
I thought we were going to maybe fight it out, but we're not.
You're going 5 too?
I'm not going 5, but I'm going to go 4.5.
4.5.
Yeah.
I honestly, I mean, there's
a ton to talk about, so I'm not worried about this podcast. But
not going too deeply into it, there's just something about this movie.
Yeah.
That as soon as it's over, I could watch it again.
Yeah.
So it's one of those movies that I don't know what it is, but it's there with me. It's like I think it's a 5-star movie for me.
Well,
it's not foundational, but it's got that intangible extra.
This to me hits all the points of why I like watching movies. All of them.
Yeah.
And so why isn't it 5 stars? I don't know. We'll probably get into that. So, and there's so many ways we could take this conversation. We could talk about this movie as a movie. Yeah. What does it do? What do you like? What do you don't like? We could talk about it. Talk about its history. We could talk about it as what is a director's responsibility to its audience.
We can talk about what's wrong with the world today.
Right. We can bring politics into it.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do all of the above. I don't know.
Maybe we'll make our own 3.5-hour epic
right
here
with
smartly
flashbacks
and nobody feels confused or bored at any point. All right, so let's start off more or less simply.
Okay.
Because this movie, like you said, there's so much to look at. Let's look at it as a movie, okay? First and foremost.
Sure.
So what works for you?
I don't understand why people who love film don't champion this as a movie, because
I have no idea.
it is... Okay, I know it won the Oscar for editing. This might be one of the best editing jobs I've ever seen in a movie.
Far.
I mean,
it's I can't even start to think about how good the editing is.
Film editing by Joe Hutching and Pietro Scalia. Joe Hutching would go on to do Almost Famous and Jerry Maguire, some stuff for Cameron Crowe.
Scalia then went to the Supreme Court.
And then died.
Is that the same Scalia?
Wow, let's bring the conspiracies in now.
Scalia.
No, Pietro Scalia ended up going. He would go on to work with Ridley Scott, editing Gladiator and The Martian.
Oh, okay.
He edited Good Will Hunting too. So he's got a lot on his resume too. So these are two, A-list editors being brought in. But my God,
I can't imagine.
So what makes the editing in this so great?
Well, first I want to say that I know that the Supreme Court Justice's first name was not Pietro. I know that Pietro Scalia is a completely different
or
person.
was it?
It may have been. When did he change his name is what I want to know.
Where are those classified documents?
Yeah,
why have they not been released?
Obama. What makes the editing so great? Was that your question?
Yes.
Well, for one, I mean, the seamless mixing of actual historical footage with current, with the story that's being told, with recreations. It's part Errol Morris documentary, part classics Oliver Stone, part like expose. It's just got like everything going on. And what's, I think, most attributable to the editing is that you are never confused.
Right.
With a cast of so many major and important people, so many instances of new information being brought in, things that you thought you knew being retold and being either false or changed, you always know where you are in this movie.
And there are flashbacks within flashbacks within flashbacks, and you always know exactly what timeline you're looking at.
Yep.
That's crazy to me.
And then
there is
flashbacks.
Super 8 footage, there's black and white footage, there's, you know when you're watching what's going on in the movie's present tense.
Yep. And it could be flashing second after second after second, and you are never confused as to whether you're watching a flashback, a real footage, a recreation, a false recreation based on the person's testimony that you're hearing talking right now.
Yes.
The whole scene with Donald Sutherland's character, which feels short, but like we were kind of joking before, it's probably closer to like a 15 or 20 minute scene.
Yeah.
Where everything Jim Garrison and we as the audience thought we knew is completely framed in a different light.
Donald Sutherland plays the X character.
Right. He doesn't give his name.
He's kind of like a deep throat character in the movie.
Yeah. And I think he may be a composite of other characters.
He's a composite.
He's not.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, you've got Donald Sutherland being this voiceover as he's talking to Jim Garrison. You've got instances of the movie showing what he had done and things we've seen and characters we've seen in new situations. And you never lose the voiceover. You're never tuning it out, but you're also not losing anything of what's happening in the scenes underneath. It's just, I've never seen anything like it,
right,
as far as an editing job.
You've got that where it's actually talking about all the conspiracy assassination stuff, and it's actually leading you through it. Then you've got the actual narrative of the story.
Right.
Jim Garrison digging all this stuff up, his family life. Yep. I mean, it's all there. Like, you have everything you need to bring the stakes where they need to be in the movie, to bring some humanity to Jim Garrison, which is necessary.
Yeah.
Whether it's
maybe
accurate or not, whatever.
Deified, yeah.
Oh, of course he is. Of course he is. But, this is one of those movies where I don't care. That deification has to service what the movie's ultimately about, which is not really about Jim Garrison.
Right.
But what you get out of that is an obsession that is made very clearly with the Sissy Spacek as the wife character and the children and all that, the family dynamic. And to be able to edit this film with all of that stuff and not have that feel like it's wedged in.
Yeah.
I mean,
It seamlessly moves in and out of what else is happening in the movie. And I think it could have happened with a different filmmaker that the movie would have been confusing.
yes.
And like they would have said, well, you know, Jim Garrison was confused. America was confused at this time. It's only right that the viewer feels confused. That is the one thing you do not feel watching this movie is confused.
Right.
You may feel perplexed. You may feel angry. You may feel a little scared. You may feel a little unsure of what's going to happen next.
Right.
But
Or even unsure of what the conspiracy even really is.
Right.
But
At those points, you're in Jim Garrison's shoes.
Yes.
You're with him, and you feel suspicious
Yeah.
rather than confused.
And you think about being in those editors' shoes where they have to kind of take Oliver Stone's jumbled conspiracy theory
All the footage.
and make some sense out of it. They're using, footage, newsreel footage, the Zapruder film. In that actual courtroom, I'm going to talk about one scene. It's this scene, basically, that I think people do talk about, which is where he back into the left, which is the Zapruder film being shown over and over again. And in the real trial, that probably wouldn't be possible because with a reel-to-reel projector,
Right.
how's that going to happen?
Unless they kept, unless they made new film and kept cutting it back in and back
Sure,
in.
and then just kept playing it over and over.
That shot just keeps
Oh,
getting
my gosh.
more and
Yeah.
more sickening.
Yes.
Because in that moment, when he keeps saying back into the left, repetition works for me when each repetition means something new. And with that, every time he kept repeating back into the left, and the shot kept showing the very graphic
Right.
depiction of it, it was just underlining the word conspiracy, basically.
Right. Exactly. Because the first time you see it, you could
Can't
be like,
true.
yeah,
Can't be true.
but. Okay, watch it.
It's
Watch it.
definitely back into the left, which
Yes.
is not.
And 13 takes Kennedy in the head from the front. This is the key shot. The president going back and to his left. Shot from the front and right. Totally inconsistent with the shot from the depository. Again, back and to the left. Back and to the left. Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
It's just every time, it's almost like he's reiterating the depth of it. Like Lee Harvey Oswald, David Ferry, Clay Shaw, then like FBI, Lyndon Johnson. Like every time he repeats it, it's just like he's reminding you of how deep his theory of this conspiracy goes.
I mean, by the time they read the not guilty verdict, you're like, well, who cares?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
I kind of forgot that there was a verdict for him.
I can't think of another trial courtroom type drama where you really don't care about the verdict at all. And one of the ways they do it cleverly is you actually never hear his lawyers make any arguments.
Yeah, that's
Tommy,
true.
the Clay Shaw, who's played by Tommy Lee Jones' character, you actually never hear the defense.
And how good was Tommy Lee Jones?
Yeah, seriously.
Unbelievable. So that's the editing. I mean, that's maybe the most impressive thing in a movie that is incredibly impressive. Also, Tommy Lee Jones, we just said, great performance. But also, somebody I'm not typically a huge fan of, Kevin Costner, really does a really good job.
I think he's well cast. So we already touched on the idea that Oliver Stone kind of deifies Jim Garrison a little bit. I think Kevin Costner, he humanizes him and sort of he makes him plain.
Yeah, he's
you know what
very
I mean?
much, you can project onto him very easily.
I think if in the script he seems ultra deified, I think Kevin Costner doesn't play that up at all.
No.
In a way that maybe some other actors might.
His paranoia kind of comes through.
Right.
And without really emphasizing it, his placing of this case above everything else, including his life with his family and including his own safety, it's just he's got flaws.
Yeah, I don't think the movie necessarily makes a case for his obsession.
No,
Or
that's a
excuses
good
it.
point.
You know?
It's funny though that Kevin Costner is the only actor name on the poster.
Yeah.
Whether that was a contractual thing or a choice, it makes perfect sense because he, aside from being the lone tie through, Tommy Lee Jones very easily could have been second bill
Mm-hmm.
because he's in it a lot. Joe Pesci is in it a lot. But it just seems so right that Kevin Costner is the only actor billed because it's Jim Garrison's movie, but Kevin Costner is almost standing in for America,
yeah.
like the American people. And so it's almost underlining the point of the movie isn't about anything other than the American people and what questions are not being answered for them.
It's like Oliver Stone says, I want to make a movie about the JFK assassination. Well, I don't want to make a documentary. I want to make a movie. So you got to have a narrative. You got to have a story. You got to have characters, you know?
Yeah.
And you could have come up with, like you did for X, come up with a composite character, some guy who just decides he's going to dig into the JFK assassination. But he decides to put it on the one district attorney that ever brought any real trial about the JFK assassination into the American light, you know? And I think Kevin Costner, he was kind of like the A-list actor of the time. It actually doesn't seem like a very timeless choice. It seems like that was a choice made to get people in the seats at the theater.
He had just won the Oscar for Dances with Wolves when JFK came out.
Right. And everyone liked him at the time.
Yes. Right.
You know, he was a star. And I think in this casting choice, it's kind of perfect because he didn't even try to like overact or anything.
No.
Or he didn't try
to
like
no Oscar moment.
No, there is no. That's exactly. I mean, it's not like he's even going for it. Like this is what's going to get me another Oscar or
even
you know.
even the courtroom scene where he looks at the camera and says like the choice is yours or whatever, like, you know, talking about questioning your government. He just says it. He's not yelling it. He's not crying.
Right.
He's just that's what an attorney would do in court. It's almost again a very smart choice on Oliver Stone's part to not get overly emotional.
The other thing, before maybe we jump into some of the bigger topics of discussion, but one thing I just want to point out that I really like about this movie is the score. John Williams' score. Mm-hmm. I don't think people would put it as like some of John Williams' like greatest hits or anything.
Because it's not
it's basically like two notes. It's like what you would see Hans Zimmer do to great effect later on.
Sure.
But to me, it is
a lot of snare drum.
There's that part, yeah, the sort of patriotic sort of snare horn kind of 90s thing that you saw a lot of.
But it works.
It does work. It gets you right into where you need to be. But when he ratchets up that really intense theme, when it's really usually when they're laying out a lot of stuff.
The magic bullet could not create all 7 of those wounds. You have to conclude that there was a 4th shot and a second rifleman. And if there was a second rifleman, then by definition, there had to be a conspiracy, which we believe involves the accused Clay Shaw. 51 witnesses, gentlemen of the jury, thought they heard shots coming from the grassy knoll, which is to the right and front of the president. Key witnesses that day, Charles Brem, the combat vet.
It's got this urgency, but it brings the intensity that you need in that, I think. But an eeriness, too. Like, you understand just those note choices. It's not a flashy score. It's basically 2 notes. But I think what you get in this is this ominous feeling. Like, something dark is going on here. But it's also giving you the intensity you need to just make that scene just like... It's like you can feel the electricity going off in your brain. Like, things just connecting. And you're like, oh, my God. You know? Which is exactly... I mean, that's very typical of conspiracy theory and paranoia. It's going to connect the dots for you in a way that maybe you didn't think about, but makes a lot of sense, you know.
Like, there's no like frantic like darting of the eyes and like, wait a minute, just like it's all just you are the one doing that, more than you're watching the characters do it. Another thing about the movie and its construction is it's pretty much a persuasive essay in a way. As an English teacher, I kind of noticed the form of it. And there are, in a good persuasive essay, you've got a refutation of the other side. And you present the opposite argument and you say, well, I understand people will say this, but here's why that's wrong, or here's why it doesn't go far enough. And this movie does that. I think in large part with that character of Bill, he is sort of the objections. He's the one who says, like, no, my government wouldn't do that. My military, whatever. He's got the faith in America. And that very logical, I just can't believe that. That's too out there for me. But he has other objections to it too. And it's almost Oliver Stone being good with his rhetoric, saying, I understand here's what people are going to say, but to counter that, here's this information.
Yeah.
But you know all these other things, so how can you still say what you're saying?
Right.
And for a movie to be structured like an essay and be so engrossing is amazing.
True. That's very
You
true.
know?
But what I'll say about, I think you're absolutely right, that Bill character, played by Michael Rooker, what I like about what Oliver Stone does with that is he never villainizes him.
No,
Ever.
not at all.
In fact, even as he's walking out on the case and saying, I can't do this anymore, you guys are being paranoid.
This was a military-style ambush from start to finish. This was a coup d'etat with Lyndon Johnson waiting in the wings.
Oh, okay, so now you're saying Lyndon Johnson was involved? The President of the United
I know
States?
this, Bill. Lyndon Johnson got $1 billion for his Texas friends, Brown and Root, to dredge Comron Bay for the military in Vietnam.
Boss,
just for opening.
Boss, are you calling the President a murderer?
If I'm so far from the truth, why is the FBI bugging our offices? Huh? Why are witnesses being bought off and murdered? Why are federal agencies blocking our extraditions and subpoenas when we were never blocked
I don't know.
before?
I don't. Maybe there's some rogue element in the government or something.
Full-blown conspiracy to cover it up? You ever read your Shakespeare, Bill?
Yeah, I do.
Julius Caesar? Brutus and Cassius, they too are honorable men. Who killed Caesar? 10, 12 senators. All it takes is one Judas, Bill. A few people on the inside. Pentagon, CIA.
This is Louisiana, Chief. I mean, how the hell do you know who your daddy is? Because your mama told you so. You were way out there taking a crap to win, boss. And I, for one, am not going along on this one.
This is a very smart screenplay, even though I think it would get panned by a lot of people as being a bunch of conspiracy theories being thrown into a pot. And there's probably, I think there's some legitimacy to that, actually, which we can get into.
Yeah.
But what I like is that Oliver Stone is recognizing that, and also recognizing that, yeah, even he, I think in that scene you are seeing Oliver Stone through the lens of Jim Garrison saying, yeah, even he doesn't quite know how all the pieces fit together, and doesn't quite know if everything he's saying is legit.
Yeah.
And you've got Bill, who in one sense is being that counterbalance and giving you the counter argument, but because he's not villainizing him, he's kind of saying, I get that.
Yeah.
I get why you would say that, and I also get that maybe we are going a little too far in some of this.
Yeah.
I think Oliver Stone in this movie at certain points is saying, I know I'm going a little too far.
Yeah, this is going out
and I
there.
think
This
that's
is taking a risk.
I think that's one of those scenes, and I think Bill, for that reason alone, is one of those reasons I think saves the movie for me. It's reasonable about the skepticism and the doubt.
There are a lot of people, and perhaps you and I included, who the more we find out about, you name it, we feel like we have formed our political opinions based on information we've received. We listen to certain experts, or like we read things and we say like, oh, if it's income inequality, it's happening, it's got its history in this, and these are the effects, and if it were to change in such and such a way, then those effects would be reduced or eliminated or whatever. And so we sit here and we absorb that, and we want that information. Like, tell me more about that so that I can continue to feed my viewpoint. But then I know there are people who are like, I can't even think about that.
Right.
Like, one, they don't want to think about systemic issues. No, it's not possible that somebody is designing this. It's not possible that people are hurting people for their profit. Like, I just don't want to live in a world where that's the truth.
Right.
And it's just too much for them to deal with. And I can't fault anybody for that, because a lot of times it's too much information to deal with. And especially when that information is pointing you against everything you've believed in or everything you thought was true, or if it really reduces your ability to find good in something you thought was good, you just shut down. And I think Bill is an extremely realistic character. Somebody who he's not vilified because he's never lost that sense of justice.
Right. I think that the movie would have been so much weaker if you had that character, but he was the guy with the shifty eyes the whole time.
Yeah,
or like the guy.
I knew he was going to turn on him, because like the trial wasn't about the verdict. The movie's not about Bill turning on them, quote unquote. You feel sad that he did it,
right?
You feel sad for Bill.
Actually, I think that's a good pivot point because I wanted to get at maybe what I felt this movie is trying to do or what it's really about. And I think that a lot of people at the time and probably even now, they just thought this movie was dangerous and reckless.
Yeah.
That it played sort of loose with some of the facts. It made some artistic choices that distorted characters. They created composite characters.
And it's not clear where they're changing facts and when they're not.
And I'll be honest, and we can get into this a little bit more. I have some issues with that. I really do. But ultimately, I think for me, what saves the movie is I don't think the movie and Oliver Stone, as the director and screenplay writer, are very sure of their case either.
Right.
I don't think this is a movie that's saying, yeah, this is what happened.
Here's the truth.
Here's the truth. You know, there's this huge cover-up and conspiracy, and you want to know. Yeah. You want to know what it is. This is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't get that sense at all.
The movie's final point is, how can anybody think Jim Garrison was wrong?
What's that?
I don't think the movie's final point is,
how
can anybody think Jim Garrison was wrong?
No, and I think part of that is even in the storytelling of making him a little bit flawed in the sense of like his obsessive nature is not praised.
It's following crazy leads and listening to lunatics.
Right. Now, I don't think the movie's about conspiracies or any conspiracy theory. I think the movie is about secrecy and how conspiracy is the natural consequence of an insistence on secrecy. Because you get that at the end when Garrison keeps saying, these are your documents, why haven't they been released? And basically, I get the feeling that Oliver Stone's saying, and I got some stuff to back it up of what he said after the film was made, that basically he's saying, I don't know what actually happened. All I know is that the story that was given to us can't be accurate.
Right.
And
why the whole truth?
Why the secrecy? If you're so sure that this is what happened, declassify all these documents. Right. Let everyone know. And basically, I think Oliver Stone's point through a lot of his career, whether it's his upcoming movie Snowden, or whether it's through his documentary series he put out a couple years ago, The Untold History of the United States, whether it's through the questions he would pitch through movies like Platoon and Born on the 4th of July. It's this idea of like the government is not useful to the people when it hides so much stuff from the people.
Right.
That seems to be his thesis over the decades, actually.
Yeah.
And that and to me, and this is where I, as a librarian, I just kind of have to agree with him, is that the more you free information, the better. Yeah. And they always will try to say that this needs to stay classified for security or for your safety.
Right.
And I think Stone's point of view is
we're less safe the
less we know. Exactly. Now it's wrapped up in this tabloid level, like just really enthralling, entertaining,
really juicy,
pitch of speculation. It's a lot of speculation. I'm not going to lie about it, but like it's what was necessary, as you mentioned in your intro, to get things done, to actually get some of these documents declassified.
It would be interesting to kind of look back at all of his films through that lens. Even though I think Quentin Tarantino wrote Natural Born Killers, it's still an Oliver Stone movie. And I just kind of, as you were talking, thought about like, what would Natural Born Killers fit into that? And it kind of does if you think about
the way it portrays the media.
Yeah, that the media is a smokescreen for that sort of thing. And I would be really interested to kind of go back and watch more Oliver Stone movies with that in mind. What is preventing openness and what happens when openness is kept from people. I kind of thought that this movie, one of the things this movie was about, was the turning point of a generation, really. I think, the generation before had World War II, that generation had the Kennedy assassination, really, sort of as the defining moment of their generation. But it was such a random, disorienting event.
Mm-hmm.
World War II, of course, like disorienting and disruptive, but fairly clear-cut. Hitler and the Axis powers needed to be stopped. The Kennedy assassination is just like, wait, what? That doesn't make sense. And so the movie is a lot, in my mind, also about the way that grief and confusion can lead to seeking answers and looking for meaning that may or may not exist. A generation of people was just kind of thrown into the air, and they didn't know what to do with that. The Vietnam War is a part of that. I think you can point to the Kennedy assassination as the moment, but the general feeling is wrapped up in Vietnam War the 1968 political unrest there and that sort of thing. But that Stone, whether he believes what he's saying or not, he really is emphasizing the sadness and the confusion and the division. People just wanted answers, and the answers they were getting weren't satisfying, and the answers they were getting didn't feel whole, and the answers they were getting raised more questions. This grief and confusion just starts raising these questions, and whether it takes you to a healthy place or whether it takes you to actual answers is almost irrelevant in this movie. But the asking of the questions is the point.
I kept asking myself through the movie, and especially near the end, I was like, okay, ultimately, I want to know, what does Oliver Stone really believe? Like, what's his point? What's he trying to say? And it's really hard to it kind of feels like just throwing stuff at the wall. Because actually, I was going to quote Richard Corliss from the Time Magazine review, which is quoted on the front of the cover of you get the DVD or Blu-ray. It's a very positive review.
Electrifying, a knockout, enthralling.
Yeah, he loved the movie, but he was trying to answer people who were negative about the movie because they thought it was irresponsible or threatening or whatever. And he wrote, "So you want to know who killed the president and connived in the cover-up? Everybody. High officials in the CIA, the FBI, Dallas Constabulary, all three armed services, big business, and the White House. Everybody done it. Everybody but Lee Harvey Oswald. Oh, Oswald was probably a double agent during his defection to the USSR, where he may have provided information that helped the Soviets gun down Francis Gary Powers' spy plane. He may also have been in cahoots with anti-Castro Cubans, but he didn't shoot JFK. He didn't even shoot Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit. The one man charged with the Kennedy assassination was precisely what he said he was, a patsy." So Corliss in this is sort of recognizing that a little bit of this is getting a little out of hand and ridiculous. So watching JFK didn't really give me any of the answers I really wanted as far as what does Oliver Stone actually believe about not even just JFK, but history in general. Like, what is he trying to say here, And
would he ever say that, like, we have the full story on anything? Like, can we believe anything?
So I dug up this Frontline panel discussion they had with him, and it was him and Nora Ephron on one side and Norman Mailer and Edward Epstein on the other side, talking about Hollywood's responsibility in movies and history. And once Oliver Stone's actually given the moment to talk, he actually lays out the 5 points he was trying to make in JFK.
Interesting.
It's like he's kind of an open book. And so the 5 things he really wanted to hammer down in JFK was, 1, that Oswald did not act alone.
Yeah.
The second point is that, connection or not, for whatever reason, Lyndon Johnson did not carry out the policies of JFK. He actually believes John F. Kennedy was the last real liberal president we ever had. The last president who actually thought we shouldn't be at war all the time. The third point he wanted to touch on is just the idea of the CIA, the idea of this secret team of fourth branch of the military, which didn't come into being until after World War II, essentially to carry on the fight against communism by using the best of what, in his words, the Nazis had to teach us. And then the fourth thing, he wanted to touch on the mafia as American mythology, and his idea that, like, we actually have this conception of the mafia being way more powerful than they actually are. Yeah. And they're kind of just thugs.
Yeah, well, there's that really important point where he's talking about the mafia, and he says, like, can the mafia reroute the parade route? Can the mafia coordinate security?
Yeah.
He's like, the mafia doesn't have the guts to pull this off.
Sure.
They do it with a 38 up close. Like, Jack Ruby was a mafia hit as far as, like, styling, whether or not it really was mafia. But but that, like, the idea that the mafia can be some answer.
Yeah, and in this panel discussion, he's like, Coppola made some amazing films, but he actually thinks it did a lot of damage to use the mafia as a cover-up for a lot of things that other people needed to start taking responsibility for. Yeah. And then the last thing he wanted to touch on in there and in JFK was the role of the media. And it gets to what you were saying, which is, and I'll just quote him from this. Sorry, I'm doing so many quotes in this. He said, "It makes me doubt all our history. I grew up in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s reading the Random House series of books on American history. I've come to have severe doubts about Columbus," and this is back in 92, where that was kind of a new thing to say.
Yeah.
Washington, the Civil War being fought for slavery, the Indian Wars, World War I, World War II, the supposed fight against Nazism and or Japanese control of resources in Southeast Asia. I doubted everything. I don't even know if I was born and who my parents were. Really interesting taking that Bill quote into context. Then he says, Howard Zinn, I think, gets it best with People's History of the United States, a book we've both read, and I would urge you to re-examine it. That's Oliver Stone saying to re-examine it.
Yeah, but I think both of us would urge people to read the People's History of the United States.
And I got to remind myself that People's History, JFK, the idea that Columbus wasn't as great as we all thought he was, that's all new at this time.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, obviously, you've got Oliver Stone's words telling you what the 5 points are that he makes in this movie, like what he was trying to do. But I think that in the movie, the clearest thesis statement is the moment before Jim Garrison looks at the camera.
That's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Do not forget your dying king. Show this world that this is still a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. Nothing as long as you live will ever be more important. It's up to you.
I just feel like when Kevin Costner or Jim Garrison says, it's up to you, and looks right at the camera, I mean, that's about as clear as you can get that the filmmaker is stepping out of the movie and saying,
breaking
like,
the fourth wall in this movie.
In this kind of movie, yeah. It's not like a meta movie. And it's very clear that he's not looking at the jury, just based on the eye lines that have been set up and all that stuff, that he is looking at the viewer. And to me, that was not a directive to people at the time of the Kennedy assassination. It wasn't a directive to people in 1991 only. It was a directive to everyone who will ever live. Like, these are questions you need to ask. And you need to be informed. You have a right to know things. And it's up to you. You put people in power, more or less.
And what I've really kind of thought about lately is, in our recent history, it takes crap like this to actually get things to happen, to get people to talk. It takes Snowden releasing all this information for us to even have a conversation about whether our government should be spying on us about, you know.
The thing is, though, you know, keeping his message about the media in mind, the media may not cover it, really. Yeah. And I think back to the RNC, nobody was talking about what was actually said. Everybody was talking about whether Melania plagiarized her speech or not.
Sure. Not to mention the fact that it takes until Trump becomes the actual nominee for a media outlet like the Washington Post to take out a full editorial and actually finally say, this guy is a threat to our Constitution, to our government. Where the hell were you?
Yeah. Could have said that a bit ago.
Like, if he's that dangerous, put aside your quote-unquote journalistic integrity, which usually is just a way to hide what everyone needs to know.
Way to not scare off advertisers. So
anyways, that's politics
you
aside.
Can guess where we're coming from. But
I think through the character of Jim Garrison, one thing you get is it is actually kind of on us to seek this stuff out.
Definitely.
You're going to have to do some of this searching yourself. You're going to have to do some of the hard work yourself.
Some offices.
You're going to have to do some FOIA requests, you know?
I think that is why this movie is so good to me. Because the glaring inconsistencies with truth, like the things that have been brought up that have been just proven false.
Yeah.
Like, that's not true. Or things that were just fabricated for the sake of the story or the point that he was making. To me, since the point is not who killed JFK, those are all in service to the point.
Sure.
It's almost like saying, I'm not going to sort the information for you. Don't look to me like you look to the media.
And this is where I'm going to push back that half star. Where I'm going to push back a little bit on that. And that is that his answer to a lot of the critics and a lot of the media at the time of this movie was, I wanted to make a counter myth to the myth of the Warren Commission. And I think that's fine. What I just wish is, I think a disclaimer would have done it for me at the beginning of the movie. Anything. And we can make a case whether certain conspiracy theories are more dangerous than others, or whether, you know, it's a good idea to bend this truth and it's okay and kind of a white lie to bend this truth. And The one that I kind of feel like is a little too far is you get a whole confession from Joe Pesci's character, the David Ferry character.
Yeah.
That never happened. So he's basically telling $200 million worth of box office gross audiences.
Yeah, which we haven't talked about yet either, but we should.
That this guy, who was a real guy, he happened to have died from cancer. First of all, makes it look like he committed suicide, or that it was some kind of weird, cover up, part of the conspiracy that he got killed.
That's what I was.
One or the
how
other.
I perceived it.
It's pretty clear he kind of just died of cancer. Like, he had cancer, he had it in the movie, and the timing was a lot more drawn out in real life than it would make you feel.
There were.
So,
that's one thing that the movie makes it look like.
All this happened in
It just sort of feels like, it's within a couple of years, but it was a long time after.
But even that, okay, so you want to make it look like this guy was killed when he actually probably just died of cancer. But what you did was you made him confess to stuff he never actually confessed to in real life. And that to me it's almost defamation of character. I'm even okay with that. If you can at least just at the beginning of the movie, and it wouldn't even have to be like this is Oliver Stone's view of things, or this is blah, blah, blah. It could even be like a really insightful quote that just sort of hints at the idea of like, I'm making a myth here.
I understand that. That alone bumps it a half star for you?
Well, because...
Or like that spirit.
That spirit.
Okay.
Where, I mean, and part of me is like, okay, but would a disclaimer kind of dilute a lot of the intensity of the movie?
I
or
think
like,
it would.
I
really think it would.
But I think if it was done in the right way, I don't know. Like, yeah, I mean,
I don't know what it was like in 1991, but it's entirely possible following a Reagan and during a Bush presidency, Stone felt like there needed to be a real shakeup for people.
I'm wrestling with this because part of me thinks if he did do some kind of disclaimer, people would write off the whole film.
That would absolutely happen. That's what I'm saying, is that he couldn't soften, or his point would be
and I guess now that I'm
lost.
thinking about it, if he is saying that people need to seek out their own truth, it's kind of like putting his money where his mouth is and kind of maybe even throwing some bendings of the truth in there so that you can go seek this out yourself afterwards and prove him wrong.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. I
genuinely
just think that's
wouldn't be
putting a lot of
surprised.
confidence on an audience that I don't really think is there.
Well, so is the Jim Garrison speech. I mean, that whole thing is...
Yeah.
There's some... He, as disillusioned as this movie is, there's still some hope for the abilities of humans to change the trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Part of me wonders if I lend Oliver Stone a lot of grace because in reality, I tend to think that he is probably right about a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
And if I'm trying to give this a fair shake, let's say, okay, I know where my politics lean. If someone from the opposite side of my politics made a very similar movie, would I be as gracious, even if it was amazingly edited and really airtight and amazing cast and
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a good question to ask yourself.
And you don't, I think, always have to ask that of a movie.
No.
But this one, I mean, it is such a political movie that politics can't not be part of the conversation, I don't think.
No, you're right.
And I don't know. These are things I'm still wrestling with. It's enough for me to just... Maybe I'll watch it again in a few years and I'll have no problems with this anymore, but it's just when I've seen lately the kind of crap people will believe.
Yeah.
And the way that crap is presented.
Right.
It's a confirmation bias. It's what I want to believe. So this is the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just very knee jerk about that right now because we are seeing what that results in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I can understand that,
and I get that you need this character needs to do this because we need it to work. For the movie, not for history. For the movie, I need this to work, and usually I'm okay with that. Even I don't know. I just it's hard to sort of tease out when that's okay and when it's not.
Yeah, and I guess my initial problem with the movie is that it opens by setting a very documentary tone.
Mm-hmm.
It gives no indication that there's going to be anything but truth.
Yeah, or not even truth, just fact.
Fact. Yes,
what we are presenting to you is just the facts.
Yes.
What you want to make out of it is up to you.
And so my questions at the very beginning, again, this was my first note, is that irresponsible or was it just being thought-provoking? And I would tend to believe he's trying to be thought-provoking.
Right.
Rather than just loose. It would be, I think, hypocritical if he said question everything you're taking in, except for this, everything I'm telling you is true. Don't question me. Even putting something in almost like an Easter egg, saying like, and if you do question this movie, you'll find that I was wrong, that you are rewarded for questioning. I mean, it's almost something like I would do as a teacher.
That's my hope. That's my hope of that. That was the level of intentionality in there. That's sort of my gracious interpretation of it.
It is a gracious interpretation, but it also, to me, feels like
I think
the movie has been so intentional in every other way. But I can't speak to its intentionality.
Yeah.
We might just go in circles if we keep talking about it. But I do have a couple questions that I wanted to raise. Why is the movie called JFK?
He answers that. Actually.
Does he really?
He does.
Because it's a movie about Jim Garrison, really. And it's not Kennedy. It's not John F. Kennedy. It's not. It's JFK.
Yeah, so I actually did get a quote from Oliver Stone of why he called it JFK, but I'm curious to know why first you thought it was just JFK and not, Jim Garrison.
Well, I don't want to be like, I think it's this. And you're like, no.
No, I think you're probably onto something.
Well, I thought by calling it JFK, it's more like the concept rather than any specific person, not about the event. It's just because the movie is exploring the phenomenon of the assassination rather than anything really about his life or about his presidency or that sort of thing.
I think you're going to really like this idea.
All right.
It is about the concept, but this actually goes into our interpretation of the film, I think, is pretty accurate. And what you were getting into about intentionality, as far as, I think, going back to even our conversation about Ferry and all that stuff. So this is what he says. He says, for JFK, he saw the models as far as film inspirations, Z and Rashomon. I see the event. I see the event in Dealey Plaza taking place in the first reel and again in the eighth reel and again later, and each time we're going to see it differently and with more illumination. And then later on, he says, somehow I had the impression that in Z... did you see Z? I haven't.
I have, but it's been so long.
Okay. It made me want to watch it. I actually hadn't seen it, but it's been one on my list forever.
Yeah.
So anyway, it says, so somehow I had the impression that in Z, you had the showing of the crime and then the re-showing of the crime throughout the picture until it was seen another way. That was the idea of JFK. That was the essence of it. Basically, that's why I called it JFK, not J.F.K. JFK. It was a code, like Z was a code. For he lives, American style. As it was written, it became more fascinating. It evolved into 4 DNA strands. So I think that's what he's saying, is basically that JFK taken together becomes more about the concept, about this idea of assassination, about this idea of the reinterpretations of it, bringing into the idea of the different interpretations you can have of it.
Yeah.
It's all wrapped up in this concept, this code that we have that we can use as shorthand, JFK,
Yeah.
Like, well, what about JFK? You can say that when you're talking
and then
about...
there's so much there.
Right.
Yeah. So this isn't quite a 3.5 hour epic episode. I didn't expect the contention that we had. It wasn't super contentious, but we had some friction. I think that makes for good drama.
Well, and I think it speaks to Oliver Stone's style and approach still being pretty edgy and still controversial.
Yeah.
Still controversial 25 years later. I don't think we quite resolved what we were saying. I don't know that we necessarily articulated all that well either, but I do feel like it's a debate that hasn't really resolved itself over 25 years as far as like what is a filmmaker's responsibility to history when it's making a historical film or to its audience, as far as how much it's going to stretch the truth, And when does it matter? When does it not?
How much should a movie push its audience? I don't know.
I wasn't questioning that. Yeah, maybe I was.
Yeah. Well, you're right. It just speaks to the depth of this movie, and for me, solidifies it as a 5-star. But we didn't. I think I must applaud our restraint in not going like note for note. How does this relate to current politics?
That's for our audience to discover themselves.
Yeah.
There
was a lot of misinformation in there.
Which was not lazy on our part. No, totally intentional.
Any flaws you catch in this episode, they're there. we know they're there. We want you to find them. So are we best buds on this one?
I think so.
Okay.
I still love this movie.
Okay, so best buds. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good time then to talk about our next episode.
Sure.
Why don't you tell us, what are we going to be watching next time, and why are we going to be watching it?
All right, so we did 25 years for JFK. We're going to do another anniversary episode. This is 30 years, and it's a movie that came out in August 30 years ago, and it is Rob Reiner's coming-of-age tale, Stand By Me, based on a Stephen King short story. And this is a movie that I really did grow up with. I do love this movie. I've had some friends lately watch it for the first time and say they hated it, which I could hardly believe. So I'm kind of eager to revisit this and see. And you were saying you've actually never seen this movie.
I haven't. So I may, who knows? I may like it.
True.
But I also maybe added to the list of friends of yours who saw it as an adult and didn't like it.
It pains me. But now I might be overselling it to you. So
by saying you think it's weird that people who saw it didn't like it?
Yeah. It's like I can't accept it. Yeah.
It's not like a real hard sell you're making.
But it's also,
I know it's revered. I know it's got a lot of supporters.
But another thing that's getting a lot of supporters is the new Netflix series Stranger Things.
Yeah. I just started watching that today.
Which is another TV show, TV-ish, right? Whatever you call Netflix. It's a series. Get
nominated at the Emmys, not at the Oscars.
About 4 tween-ish boys in the 80s. Which Stand By Me,
stylized.
Yeah, Stand By Me, by the way, does not take place in the 80s. It takes more place in that sort of baby boomer 50s, 60s time period. But it was made in the 80s. And so, again, I think we're going to bring nostalgia probably back into this like we always do.
I guess.
We'll see. So that's what we're watching.
Okay.
And I'm excited to rewatch it. And
I'm excited to see it. I know it's one of those everybody assumes you've seen it movies.
And it's Rob Reiner. River Phoenix is in it.
Yeah, I know. Oh, gone too soon. Now, Rob Reiner has also directed some real stinkers.
But some undeniable classics.
Yes.
So we can talk about that. Where does this fit? Where does this fit? Where are you going to put it?
Is it Spinal Tap, or is it, North?
Is it Princess Bride, or is it...
North?
Rumor has it...
North?
He did the bucket list.
Oh, he did the bucket list?
So watch it with us.
Let us know your thoughts on JFK or Stand By Me, Oliver Stone. And you can do that on our website, canwestillbefriends.net. Email us, feedback at canwestillbefriends.net. Find us on Facebook. Just search Can We Still Be Friends. No .net needed when you're searching on Facebook.
But a question mark helps.
Yeah.
It helps. You don't have to type it in.
Yeah, it's just more precise.
We're on Twitter. CWSBF.
Right.
And, you can give us a call.
You can.
I'm waiting by my phone.
Yeah.
And
Nate lost his job.
I know.
That was
silly. Worth it.
You
think it's silly. I think it's worth it.
I know you do, but...
That's how much I love what we do on this podcast. Well, I sit by the phone and wait for people to call, and they never do.
They never do.
When you decide to finally call, so I can... regain some dignity.
Yeah.
847-306-9532. That's the number.
And if when you call, you've got a good job lead for him, because his wife is
I'm wondering if
really bringing home the bacon.
I'm wondering if the reason we don't get calls is because I never leave enough time for people to go grab a pen and paper.
Oh, okay.
So maybe I should...
Just wait a sec.
Yeah, so let me just...
Or to pull over
go
if you're
grab
listening in the car.
847-306-9532.
Yeah.
And if you didn't take the time to go grab pen and paper, this is a podcast, so you can rewind it a few seconds and make sure you get that number.
Yep. And, of course, there are several avenues to find the podcast itself. Mm-hmm. If you're listening, you've apparently found one of those. Good job. iTunes, Google Play,
Stitcher,
Player.fm,
TuneIn,
our website, canwestillbefriends.net.
There's a ton of places, so... I don't want to hear you say, "Oh, I'd love to tell my friends all about your podcast,but they never know where they can find it." So we just gave you a whole list,
and that's all you say. Man, Nate won't be happy.
Well, I think I will. I'll just be happy someone called, but then I'll think about it and I'll be like, "Well,
wait a minute,
that wasn't that great."
That's a weak phone.
That's not the kind of clip I can put in our episodes. Anyways,
neither is this bandit, but it'll be there.
But I do want to thank everyone who does take the time to listen to this podcast. We're just so thankful that you're listening, and we will catch you next time when we discuss Stand By Me.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.